have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was, yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply, it was almost impossible for me to sweat.
All of us knew that he had lied to our faces when he told us that he didn't sweat, that he had developed some kind of perspiration situation because of the fear in his heart during the Falklands. And all of us were, cast our eyes at each other like, what? I never have heard tell, right? And I mean, I'm married to a combat veteran. Never have ever heard him or any of his friends or any of his associates ever say, yeah, you know what happens? You can't sweat after these terrifying incidents where you're fighting for your life. Never have I ever, right? I'm not saying I know about all the things, but I think we all knew that was a lie. But why would you lie like that when, we literally have pictures of him walking out with sweat marks under his arms as he comes out of these clubs after dancing all night with these youngsters? Why would you lie like that when you know we can prove? If you're going to lie, don't tell a lie I can prove. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Tia Denise. We're going to keep going in Entitled. Now, so far, this book has felt like it's all about Sarah. I've seen people in the comments saying, oh, so I guess this isn't really a book about Prince Andrew. And, on the one hand, we haven't gotten as much about Prince Andrew as I expected. I think probably the palace had something to do with the amount of information that Andrew Lowney was able to give because they really wanted this book not to go out. But if you've been sitting there thinking, okay, this is all really interesting about Sarah, but I really wanted some stuff about Prince Andrew, pull up a chair, okay? Like I told you last time, this is where we're getting into Epstein. And of course, we know Andrew's affiliation with Epstein. So this is where we're going to really start getting into that. According to this book, well, we can date the relationship back to the early 2000s, right there at 1999. In actuality, they probably knew each other in the early 90s. And there's some documentation that they were hobnobbing in the same circles as early as 1993. So our story starts here because we have definitive proof, but the likelihood that they knew Epstein long before 1999 is very high. I feel like we completely shift gears as we're reading about this because it feels so current, even though all this stuff was happening 25 years ago, because it's conversations that we've been having lately as a culture about Epstein and everything he was involved with. All this information just feels so relevant in a way that the previous information, while so interesting, was felt like it happened a long time ago. This all feels like this happened yesterday. So I hope that you'll enjoy this as much as I did. Reading ahead just a little bit last night. Sometimes I don't read ahead, sometimes I do. Last night I had a chance to read ahead. Riveting. Okay, so let's jump into it. Like I said, this whole section we're going to be reading now is called Epstein, and the subtitle for this section is Enter Jeffrey Epstein. On the morning of February 9th, 1999, a small group gathered at Teterboro Airport, just outside New York, ready to catch a Gulfstream jet to St. Thomas, second largest of the U.S. Virgin Islands. One of the three waiting passengers was the glamorous socialite, Ghislaine Maxwell, who had fled to New York in 1991 from the UK on a $100,000 annual allowance to support her father, Robert Maxwell's business activities. Shortly afterwards, the media baron, with long-standing connections to British, Russian, and Israeli intelligence, had met a sudden and mysterious death, whether from suicide, an accident, or, as his youngest daughter believed, murder. Her personal assistant, Emmy Taylor, waited with her. The third and final member of the group was Prince Andrew. He claimed he had met Ghislaine while she was at Oxford in the 1980s, but it's far more likely that he'd been introduced to her through his ex-wife. Both women were well known on the New York social circuit. Andrew and Ghislaine were good friends, and over the years had been occasional lovers. And through her, the prince had come into the ambit of her boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was 7 years older than Andrew, and had made a fortune from his own money management firm, J. Epstein & Company, handling $15 billion on behalf of a group of secretive clients, as financial advisor to the billionaire Leslie Wexner, chairman of the lingerie firm Victoria's Secret, and, as he described himself, a financial bounty hunter. Epstein had also been involved in a Ponzi scheme soliciting over $500 million in investments, which he had then spent on himself. The lantern-jawed New Yorker had stood by Ghislaine after the death of her father and the subsequent discoveries of Robert Maxwell's crimes, and, according to bank records, over the period 1999 to 2007, would give her more than $30 million to restore her to the lifestyle to which she had been accustomed. In return, the well-connected Oxford graduate played a crucial role in Epstein's complicated but lucrative business and personal life, introducing him to influential contacts and organizing a steady stream of young girls to be supplied to the very same men who would then be blackmailed, as well as satisfying his own demanding sexual needs. It had been suggested the connections go further back and that Robert Maxwell, before his death, entrusted Epstein with up to $20 million to hide from creditors. There were also long-standing connections between Maxwell and Donald Trump. They had both bid for the New York Post and often met socially. A product of working-class Coney Island, Epstein owned houses all over the world, including a 50,000-square-foot townhouse, the largest in Manhattan, valued at $77 million, an 8,000-acre ranch in New Mexico, and a home in Palm Beach, 2 miles from Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. It was, however, to his 72-acre private island, sometimes known as Little St. Jeff's, replete with helipad, lagoon, and villa, served by a staff of 70, which he had bought the year before for $7.95 million, that the party was now heading by helicopter. The trip was not, and never had been listed on any of Andrew's official schedules because he was not there on official business. His visit was purely for pleasure. Over the years, the extent of the pleasure would become clear. Andrew returned 3 days later, accompanied by one of the women provided by Epstein for the enjoyment of his guests, Anna Malova, appointed Miss Russia the previous year in order to compete in the 1998 Miss Universe competition, and a close friend of Donald Trump. The Duke of York claims to have only met Epstein earlier that year, though it is unlikely that such a close relationship could have been nurtured in a matter of weeks. The truth is, Andrew and his ex-wife had known the financier for almost a decade by then. According to Andrew's private secretary, Alistair Watson, the two men had met in the early 1990s. The flight logs of Epstein's plane alone, known as the Lolita Express because it flew so many young girls, reveal the Duchess traveled on it with Epstein the previous April. Whatever the exact dates of their meeting, Jeffrey Epstein and Andrew had by then become business contacts and friends, united by a shared interest in money and sex. In April 1999, Epstein threw Andrew a dinner at his Manhattan townhouse, and the following month, according to Miles and Kathy Alexander, a South African couple hired to manage Epstein's Caribbean property, the Duke came to the private island via helicopter with his bodyguard and a woman in her 30s, who said she was a brain surgeon. She was tall, bleach blonde, had big boobs. They shared a room and spent most of their time on windsurfing, sailing, or doing other water sports. One day he came back into the house in great mirth, claiming his guest had stepped on a sea urchin and he urinated on her foot as a remedy. "The royal member's done its duty," he chuckled. What a pig. I think the thing about Andrew is, what is with the extended childhood he seems to be on? That sounds like something that, my 8 and 12-year-old would do. And it's like, ha, 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 ho, ho, ho. That's really hilarious, boys. But this man is, in his 40s or approaching. What are we doing bringing these random big-boobed, bleach-blonde girls who claim to be brain surgeons and then peeing on their feet and then, coming in and telling everybody at the house about it? Gross. In July, Andrew invited Epstein and Ghislaine to visit Balmoral for an overnight stay at the 7-bedroom lodge on the estate. They arrived accompanied by 2 friends, Fiona Fawley and Eric Taylor. One, a model in her 20s, related how on the first night Andrew provided a tour of the estate. "He was really nice," she said. "He was very polite." But of course, very nice, very polite can't last forever because, listen to this, I don't even understand what's happening here. I do not understand what he's so angry about. But the book says, the next day they had a picnic in the grounds of the castle. Then, just before dinner, which was to be fillet of beef, the Duke apparently became incandescent with rage, screaming, "Who the effing idiot cut the meat up?" sending the cook into the pantry in tears. Other staff, accustomed to the Duke's tantrums on virtually a daily basis, covertly exchanged knowing glances. By the time the meat had been barbecued, the Duke was all smiles and full of compliments for the cook on her Victoria sponge, which was his way of apologizing. That's what he always does. Explode one minute and then try to take it back the next. What's he mad about the meat for? What happened with the meat? Why is he incandescent with rage, screaming, "Who the effing idiot cut this meat up?" What a thing to say. It just doesn't make any sense. Why would you be so angry? And why do you care? Just show up and eat it. You don't have to cook it. You don't have to care about it. Just eat it. Andrew's friendship with Epstein continued, with invitations to Windsor and a shooting weekend at Sandringham in January 2000. The following month, the prince, introducing himself to guests as Andrew York, was photographed with Ghislaine and Epstein at a party at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago Country Club in Palm Beach. There he took a fancy to two 20-something guests, Gwendolyn Beck and Christina Drangsholt. Beck managed about $65 million of Epstein's investment funds for Morgan Stanley, and had already met the Duke the previous year and brought along her friend, Drangsholt, who ran a mail-order business that specialized in selling testosterone, the hormone that enhances the male sex drive, which she advertised as, "Get more bang for your buck." The next day, after a round of golf with Trump, Andrew joined the two women at the pool. They had a wonderful time, according to Drangsholt, who later distributed pictures of herself with the prince to social and business contacts, calling him charming and very attentive, but insisting that they were all just good friends. We're just good friends. We just play around in the pool together with him. Okay, you guys, what kind of guy with the money that Epstein had is going to give some 20-something $65 million? Why does Gwendolyn Beck have $65 million of Epstein's investments in her dominion? Why would he choose this? Is that just like the official story? I just don't feel like I'd give $65 million to any 20-year-old I knew, even if they were brilliant. I feel like I want a seasoned veteran. $65 million is a lot of money to hand over to somebody to like look after my investments. And I thought Epstein was supposed to be this big money man. Why is he getting somebody else to do what his very job is? Sounds to me like she wasn't really doing nothing with his money. Sounds to me like she was just a playmate. Okay, this next section is called The President and the Prince. In December 2019, Donald Trump, interviewed on television, would deny knowing Andrew in spite of extensive photographic records of their public meetings going back 20 years, including the visit to Trump's Palm Beach home in February 2000. In October 2000, both of them had attended Heidi Klum's Halloween costume party, at which Trump was quoted as saying of Andrew, "He's not pretentious, he's a lot of fun to be with." I don't understand why he would deny knowing Andrew. At the time he knew Andrew, he was also a different person. You know what I'm saying? Like, Trump has had two very different personas. There was the crazy rich playboy, making deals, goofing off, and then there's the president. And at one stage in his life, he was publicly admired. Everyone liked him. People thought he was great. They thought he was a good time. Then he became president and people hated him. Like, at a certain time in his life when he was grabbing women by the you-know-what and carrying on in a certain way, that doesn't seem to be who he is now. I don't know why he has to pretend that what happened before didn't happen, because we're all witness to it. We know it did. People can change. So if he's trying to have like a more sober image, if he's trying to delineate between before and now, don't lie about it. Just be like, yeah, I did know that guy, but I was also very different then as well. Lying about it just does not look good. Shortly afterwards, and clearly good friends, Trump and Andrew together were overheard at an event discussing Trump's plans for a golfing complex in the northeast of Scotland, talking entirely about pussy, with the American producing a list of masseuses for the prince. In a 2015 interview with Fox News host Sean Hannity, Trump would be asked what he thought of former President Bill Clinton. He replied, "Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein." When a Bloomberg reporter asked Mr. Trump what problems he thought Mr. Clinton would be faced, he replied, "I don't know, but that island was a real cesspool. There's no question about it. Just ask Prince Andrew. He'll tell you about it. The island was an absolute cesspool." He was talking about Little St. James, which Andrew had first visited back in 1999. In 2007, Epstein told one author that he had facilitated the relationship between Trump and his future wife Melania. "The first time Donald Trump had sex with Melania was on my plane. Little did he know I beat him to the punch a year before, when I was at a party of New York's top models by Metropolitan Models, one of the world's top agencies. Things got wild, and by the end of the night, I ended up almost naked in the back of the limo, going at it with Melania. I'll leave it to your imagination how the rest of that night went." One of Palm Beach's wealthiest residents, who knew both Epstein and Trump, related how the future president had tried to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein by claiming he wasn't close to him. It's the furthest thing from the truth. The witness recalled attending several functions at which both men were present, including one in 2002, when they were sitting at the same table and talking to each other most of the time. He also described a party on a private yacht, for which several Russian escorts had been booked. Both Trump and Epstein were there, and attractive young girls surrounded them. They both seemed to be in their finest element around the girls. My only problem with this is that, well, I don't doubt every word of this is true, The person who's saying he was a witness to it was also present at the party. So how do you malign the activities and the relationship of two people if you clearly seem to have been a member of this party on the yacht? Aren't you also complicit in a party where several Russian escorts have been booked? Do you know what I'm saying? I don't doubt that he's telling the truth. I don't know how these people bear witness to events, yet somehow I was on the outside of it, though. Like, it feels the same as the people who are always ratting on Fergie. What a crazy nightmare she was. But it's like, yeah, but you were literally sleeping with her. That's how you know she was crazy, you know? And this person over here, well, Trump and Epstein were good friends. I don't doubt it. They ran in the same circles. I have no doubt they were friends. But also, you were there. Anyway, the source also claimed the two men were involved in several business deals and that Epstein was Trump's go-to man whenever he wanted to have fun. Terrific guy, Trump told New York Magazine. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. Epstein's black book had 16 numbers for Trump, and the financier told Michael Wolff he was Donald's closest friend for 10 years. During 2000, Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein invited Prince Andrew, by now enjoying his status as a divorced man, to a number of social events in New York, including a party hosted by designer Ralph Lauren and a £630-a-head charity concert in aid of the American Friends of the London Philharmonic Orchestra. The Duke continued to spend time with Epstein and Ghislaine, often staying at the millionaires' homes in New York and Florida. The Duchess of York frequently stayed there too. The footnote says that in the year 2000 she'd stayed 3 times before April ever even rolled around. That summer, a British couple staying with Ghislaine met Andrew at a party at Epstein's house where guests, including a 2-time Oscar-winning actress, played games of virtual tennis on the huge movie screen in the basement. The next night, they ate at a neighborhood restaurant and were told Andrew would be joining them. As one recollected, I remember seeing him sitting at a table at the far end with these 3 young, not underage, blonde girls when he walked in. He immediately got up, I imagine, to join us, but instead he said goodbye and left with them in tow. It's all very strange. Ivan Novikov, Jeffrey Epstein's personal driver, remembered, "Whenever Andrew was in town, I'd be picking up young girls who were essentially prostitutes." He continued, "One time, I drove Prince Andrew and 2 young girls around age 18 to the Gainsford Hotel in the meatpacking district. Both girls were doing lines of cocaine. Prince Andrew was making out with one of them." What? He's doing... No wonder they didn't want this book to come out. Andrew is being driven around in Epstein's car. In the back of the car with him are 2 18-year-old girls. They're doing lines of cocaine, and he's making out with one of them? There's nothing else he could have been doing for the Palace for England? There's not a ribbon he can cut? A poor orphan's head he can pet? I mean, come on. Epstein's housekeeper, Deborah Gale, alleged Andrew's interest in young women. One night, he took a Swedish girl in his bedroom. They spent the entire night together and most of the next day. Pressed further, Gale added, "When the girls would leave Andrew's bedroom, I would give them an envelope Mr. Epstein left with anywhere from $1,000 to $25,000 in it, sending on the girl and the situation." So, Andrew's not paying for sex, but his friend Epstein is. Andrew wasn't seeing prostitutes. They were just these random girls who he just sort of seemed to stumble into whenever he was over at his friend's house. And, they were just sort of hoisted into his bed. And, but no money ever left his hands. No. But Epstein would pay them. Moving on to the next section, this little bit is entitled, "We're Just Friends." Andrew's friends had taken pity on him, ostensibly spending his weekday evenings watching videos in his Buckingham Palace apartment. His new social life was orchestrated by the identical Wigram twins, Camilla and Lucy, both of whom were friends with Andrew's former girlfriend, Casey Neville, who also began to introduce him to eligible women. Another key matchmaker, Mala Lindsay, hosted a series of parties for the Duke in her luxurious apartment in Chelsea Harbor, where it was said the Concord crowd meets the Inverness sleeper set. A friend of Sarah's explained, "Andrew's a strange guy. He likes to have his women on a plate. The shorter the skirt and the slimmer the figure, the better. And Mala's great gift is that she's a superb matchmaker." As a result, Andrew was chosen as number 1 on Tatler's most invited party list in July 2000. He loved being top of the Tatler list and couldn't stop talking about it, a friend said. He was boasting about it, even. Whatever his public statements, Andrew was now emotionally free of Sarah, much to her distress. A lapel badge given to him at the Staffordshire factory making Massey Ferguson tractors, which he had pinned to his office door at the palace, had said, "I love my Fergie," and it was removed. For years, the Duchess had put a brake on his romantic life. According to one friend, if he did meet a girl, Sarah would always find fault with her and put him off. Now that they had been divorced for 4 years, he felt free to play the field. He'd met his next girlfriend, Audrey Rainbold, at the Ryder Cup in Massachusetts in September 1999. The following month, she was to be listed several times on the Lolita Express. Rainbold was 16 years his junior and an actress. She'd been the body double for Judith Godrich in the 1998 film The Man in the Iron Mask, and a film school graduate. She also spoke French, English, and Spanish, dividing her time between an apartment in Paris and her parents' chateau near Monte Carlo. Like Andrew, she played off a handicap of 8, and for the previous 5 years had been working for a firm called Promo Golf. She became a regular visitor to Buckingham Palace in Windsor. Though when pressed about the nature of their relationship, she replied, "We're just friends." All right, it's time for him to turn 40. This section is called A Milestone Birthday. For his 40th birthday, on 19th of February, the prince, with his ex-wife and daughters, enjoyed a ride on the London Eye. For security reasons, the royal party had their own capsule, and members of the public were not allowed on until 45 minutes after their arrival at 11 that morning, with the result that some people had to wait for up to 2 hours. "You lot are nothing but freeloaders!" screamed one man as the Yorks emerged from a jag and stepped straight into one of the pods. That evening, the family held a £30,000 birthday party for the prince at Sunninghill. Sarah Ferguson had organized a 30-minute video tribute based on the television program This Is Your Life, featuring, among others, Elton John. And in honor of Andrew's Royal Navy service, staff had laid out the canapé around models of ships and helicopters and a fleet of tiny wooden yachts on each table. The senior royals, the Queen, Prince Philip, Prince Anne, Prince Charles, and Prince Edward, did not attend. Amid continuing concerns that Sarah had been leaking stories about them to the press, the relationship since the divorce had grown even frostier. Can we just pause? The man's having his 40th birthday. It seems like it's quite a blowout. £30,000 have been spent. And none of his family show up? But it's also abnormal. His ex-wife is throwing his 40th birthday party? I mean, no wonder his family was like, we'll pass. The drama that's been created by that woman. And then she throws this great big party with money she doesn't have, and she wants them to come. Why? So that she can then get dirt on them and pass it off as her next story. I mean, I don't blame them for not going. But it is so dramatic. I wish Andrew had just told her, I'm going to spend my 40th in a different way. You don't need to put on any kind of shindig. Andrew's dignified silence over his wife's behavior had won him public sympathy, and palace recognition that he might spearhead a campaign to restore the monarchy's tarnished image after the continued revelations of Charles' affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. In mid-March, he set off on a 10-day tour of the Caribbean. At Easter, he flew with his ex-wife and children to stay in the Bahamas with Irish businessman Tony O'Reilly, and visited, but not, as it is often claimed, stayed with, fashion tycoon Peter Nygaard's property, which featured smoke-breathing snake sculptures, a 50-foot faux Mayan temple, and nude statues based on Nygaard's past girlfriends. I don't think this author's going to go into it, but we do know about Peter Nygaard, don't we? Peter Nygaard is the one who's obsessed with not aging. This is the adrenochrome guy, the guy who wants to harvest blood from people whose systems have been flush with adrenaline, and he wants to do something with that blood in order to make himself live longer. You guys know about these conspiracy theories, and I say conspiracy loosely. I think we know this to be fact now, but this is the guy who's all about it, okay? So I don't care if he didn't stay. He knows the guy, and that's enough for me. Well, I shouldn't say that. Lots of people know lots of people who probably have done some bad things. Probably all of us have run our paths have crossed with somebody who, if we knew all their dirt, we'd be horrified, okay? So I guess I shouldn't say, well, if he knows him, but that's not really a fair statement. I think, though, that if you are in the situation where you know all these rich people and you're already hobnobbing with some very nefarious fellows, for you to also know Peter Nygaard, I have problems. I'm concerned, I guess I should say. That's concerning. Andrew had resumed his on-off affair with Ghislaine Maxwell. Even that. See, that's like, we know he's living wild. Ghislaine Maxwell is the girlfriend of Epstein. If you call this guy a friend, he's over there paying the prostitutes for you so you can get away with it. And then you're like, but I'm going to hook up with your girlfriend too. Like, that's the twisted world he's in. Everyone's just sleeping with everybody else. There's no honor. There's no dignity. There's no respect for the relationships among others. Anyway, he had resumed it. It says here that in May, they were spotted holding hands at Nella's restaurant in Madison Avenue before flying to Miami with model Naomi Campbell and Alexia Walliard, a Parisian art dealer on the Lolita Express. The following month, Ghislaine and Epstein were pictured with Andrew at Royal Ascot, and they were among the 800 guests at the Black Tie Dance of the Decades, marking Andrew's 40th birthday, Princess Anne's 50th, Princess Margaret's 70th, and the Queen Mother's 100th. The relationship with Ghislaine was also good business. According to one of her friends, Cynthia Matthews, they did foreign deals together, including a hugely lucrative tobacco deal in Malawi. I told her she was crazy to get involved in it. She didn't seem to care, and she admitted to me that Prince Andrew helped broker the deal. Matthews said Ghislaine also told her about a luxury vehicle deal she was going with Prince Andrew in Thailand. She said Andrew loved Thailand, spent a lot of time there. Oh, I bet he does. The June issue of Tatler carried a 12-page interview with the Duke by the editor Geordie Gregg on the £250 million fundraising campaign for the NSPCC, in which Andrew confided amid rumors that he had raised the issue over lunch with Tony Blair. I don't rule remarriage out, and I certainly don't rule it in, adding that he knew his reputation was that of a cack-handed blonde dating oaf. In reaction, bookies slashed the odds on remarriage from 33-1 to 3-1, and a Daily Mirror poll showed that nearly 90% of the readers wanted the couple to remarry. But a friend of the Duchess said there is not a chance of her putting her head back in that lion's cage. Greg found the prince open, warm, and had a surprising moral strength. He is different from the caricature we apply to him, a strong-minded and unconventional young man, articulate and forceful. There's certainly no trace of hauteur remoteness or even noblesse oblige. Della Gheradesca also rubbished claims that Andrew and Sarah might remarry, saying that his 3-year relationship with the Duchess, who he had called the Red Thunderbolt, was as strong as ever, and explaining she had just thrown him a 50th birthday party. In August, they were pictured embracing as they cruised on his yacht off the coast of Sardinia. The press had, however, wondered over the previous 3 years how serious the relationship was, and whether, like many of the Duchess's apparent romantic relationships, it was not simply a business arrangement, after it had been uncovered that he had paid her £25,000 a time to take part in various publicity stunts, including promoting Livorno's new docks. You guys, this is one of the things I have my concerns about Sarah. We haven't said it this bluntly, but I'll say it now. She's prostituting herself. You don't need me to say it. It's been pretty obvious. She's constantly with men, constantly with men, constantly with men, and then receiving financial payments. That is what a prostitute does. If you're in a real relationship with somebody, they don't pay you to do things. They're not giving you huge sums of cash for your association. Even if you're not sleeping with somebody, if it's not an overt business deal like lawyers were involved, you don't need people like funneling cash to you for favors. It's not as bad as sleeping with them, but, why is everything so under the table with this girl? So if you have had a myriad of deals where you're doing under the table things for people, sex not on the table yet, but you're just doing a myriad of things for people, kind of under the table, they give you cash for your name. And then coupled with that, your personal life is a shambles and you'll sleep with anything that walks as long as they'll pet your head and say, you're a nice person, if they will then slap you across the face because you like that too. If you're used to just having a messy personal life and then you got a messy public life, at some point you're going to marry those two. Because why should you be having debased sex for free? You could get some money for the pain that you were just in, I don't see it as some wild concept that this guy was also paying for her relationship. That July, after the Queen had overruled objections from courtiers, Andrew staged a charity tennis match on the grounds of Buckingham Palace for the NSPCC. Guests, paying £2,500 a head and entertained by Art Garfunkel, watched John McEnroe beat Bjorn Borg. The match was broadcast live on BBC Two and raised over $1 million worldwide. Journalist Richard Kay revealed that the Duke had also dined every night of the last week of July with Caroline Stanbury, a goddaughter of Sarah Ferguson. Yuck. Yuck. What is he doing every night of the week with this girl who's his ex-wife's goddaughter? Hideous. Part of the Vesti dynasty, one of the richest families in Britain, Stanbury had previously been linked with footballer Ryan Giggs, Prince Albert of Monaco, and actors Sylvester Stallone and Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant, okay. According to friends, Andrew was besotted with the PR girl, 16 years his junior. She claimed to be only a friend, but the interview for You magazine suggested the sideways glance to her publicist suggests a rehearsed response. In a familiar pattern, the two were keen to keep the relationship secret. After they were spotted leaving the nightclub China White, they split up moments before walking out into a barrage of flashlights, with a perspiring prince in open-necked shirt and jeans leading the way. Perspiring prince, was he? And all after his time in the Falklands, too. All right then. Andrew had become a regular at China White on Wednesday nights and was often to be seen dining at Naboo, the Met Bar, and Momo. A particular favorite was the Rock nightclub on Embankment, whose owner, Piers Adams, remembered the Duke as a very enthusiastic patron. He really goes for it. Sometimes I look across the room and catch him doing this really intense hands in the air ravers dance. You guys, this is so unbecoming. Journalist Peter Jukes recalled Andrew at China White, dressed in a blazer with gold buttons, slightly incongruous clothing for such a hip joint, and being deputed by the management to take care of him, not least by buying him drinks. Jukes found it hard to make conversation with the Duke and was relieved when Andrew was distracted by the American socialites Nikki and Paris Hilton. The prince spent the rest of the evening dad dancing with the 19 and 17-year-olds. Jukes noted he sweated profusely. I bet he did. I just don't understand why any guy who's 40 years old wants to hang out with somebody who's 19 and another one who's 17. That sounds so bleak, especially when those two girls didn't have any personality, okay? Ditzy, dumb, no depth. You know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't care and love for them. They're also made in God's image. I'm just saying I don't understand going out of my way. Like, I could have a conversation with an adult. This Peter Jukes might have had something to say for himself. He's a journalist, probably fairly interesting, might have a couple of stories, might have something to say, you know. But I'm going to pause that because I want to go do some rave-style dancing out on the dance floor with a couple of American socialites who don't know their right hand from their left. Why would he want to do that? You know, but again, I don't think that we can overstate his immaturity, his lack of growth, his slow development. His maturity seems to have just completely stopped at the age of 12. You know, so maybe in the same way that a 12-year-old would be excited if like some 19-year-old wanted to dance with them, maybe that. I mean, I don't know. I don't get it. Somebody need to give that man a job. You know how they say that he was most at ease when he was in the Navy, when he was flying helicopters, because he knew exactly what his job was. He knew he was good at it. He could do it. They'd given him a job, and he was following it through. Somebody needed to do that to him for his whole life. These are your duties. This is what you're supposed to do, and then give him lots of praise for doing it. That's what he needed. He needed high praise and a lot of boundaries. Otherwise, he's going to do this kind of shenanigans. And it all comes down to the fact that everybody just gave him whatever he wanted when he was a kid. We started this book out that way. They called him a spoiled little shit for a reason. And now he's this person who's 40 years old, and he's just stoked to be dancing with the Hilton girls. Horrific. But I am excited to be reading more about him and what he's up to. All of us knew that he had lied to our faces when he told us that he didn't sweat, that he had developed some kind of perspiration situation because of the fear in his heart during the Falklands. And all of us were, cast our eyes at each other like, what? I never have heard tell, right? And I mean, I'm married to a combat veteran. Never have ever heard him or any of his friends or any of his associates ever say, yeah, you know what happens? You can't sweat after these terrifying incidents where you're fighting for your life. Never have I ever, right? I'm not saying I know about all the things, but I think we all knew that was a lie. But why would you lie like that when, we literally have pictures of him walking out with sweat marks under his arms as he comes out of these clubs after dancing all night with these youngsters? Why would you lie like that when you know we can prove? If you're going to lie, don't tell a lie I can prove. Same with Donald Trump. Why are you lying to us about your connection to Epstein? We know you guys were friends. We also know you were living a very different lifestyle before. We get it. Some people are going to hold that lifestyle against you, okay? All right, well, you can't help that. But you can help if you lie about it, because then that makes it look like you have something to hide. If you really were just hanging out with this guy for his social contacts, a lot of people did that, But don't lie about it, because that looks crazy. Then you look like you're a psycho. Same with Andrew. Don't lie about your sweating situation. Now you look like a psycho, because here's a picture of you sweating. So why did you say you didn't? What are you hiding? What is your problem, Anyway, we'll continue this on tomorrow. And then, of course, Friday News Roundup. I'll see you then. Bye.